Okay guys, today what I'm going to do is show you how to divide using explicit trade. Now, a couple things to remember about this. We did ladder division, and ladder division makes sense because you see the size of each group that you're putting in. It's very clear. This is what we call an algorithm, and an algorithm is simply a series of steps that you use to get to the answer. And that's what this is. There are 4 repeated steps. You just keep doing them over and over until you run out of numbers to work with. The steps you always do in this order: divide, multiply, subtract, scooch. And the visual we did was this. We went divide, multiply, subtract, scooch. Just like that. And that kind of gives us another way to remember those steps. Okay. The first step is to create your template. Now, you can use this with 2-digit, 3-digit, or 4-digit, or 5, or 6, or 7-digit, any amount of digits in your dividend. We only go up to 4 digits. So my divisor is 6. I'll put that here. Whoops, actually I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself. I'm not doing that yet. I'm creating my template. Okay, because I have 4 values that I'm dividing by, I want to create 4 spots. Now, I usually refer to these as walls, and since we have walls, we're going to call this the house. It needs a floor. That's where we begin. If you notice, it looks very similar to the area model that we use for multiplication, the difference being, of course, that right here we have this nice curve which indicates we're dividing. Now, the other things that we're going to do are these. Put our subtraction symbol right here on each one of them, because each time we subtract. And then we're going to create an arrow because the difference moves over. And as you become more and more proficient at this, you eventually won't use the arrows. Now you'll notice when I go outside of the house here, my arrow goes way up here. That's because eventually even if my remainder is 0, I like to have this because it helps me remember that's where my remainder goes. One of the most common things I see students do is forget to write down the remainder. They'll leave it down here. So that is an important step. Now on the next slide that I show you, the numbers will be there, but I do want to write them in on this one so you see. My 6, my divisor goes here. I really strongly encourage you to make sure this is curved so that you don't ever look at it as a 1. Now, as we place the dividend in there, you'll want to put it right to the far right side of each one of these. So, I put my 8, my 4, my 5, and my 9. And as I'm solving the problem, you'll see why I want them to the far right. It just helps keep things neat and organized. Okay, so now we had our template set up. Now I tried to code this in colors so that we can see our symbols a little more clearly, our divisor, and our dividend. Now, divide. The first question is, how many times does 6 fit into 8? Well, without going over, and I need to be as close as I can get. Well, clearly in this case it's 1. I go directly up there. This is where my quotient will be written, or the answer to my division problem. So I put a 1. That was divide. Now I multiply. I took 6 and used them, so I have to show 1 group of 6. 1 times 6 is 6. That was divide. Multiply. Now subtract. 8 minus 6 is 2. Now what basically this means is I have 2,000. And we call it explicit trade because I'm trading 2,000s in for 2010s. That's what it means when I move it over here. So the 2 goes here. Now, how many times does 6 go into 24? Well, that one actually comes out nice and even, doesn't it? We have exactly 4 groups. So I divide it. How many times can 6 go in, or 24 divided by 6? Now, 4 times 6 equals 24. So since I used them, I have to remove them. 24 minus 24 is 0. Now, even though I have a 0 right there, I still want to move it over because the pattern is a whole lot easier to learn if I do it consistently every single time. So a 0 in front of a 5 basically means I still have 5. Now, here's another important component in this. You always have a number above each digit in your dividend. 0 is a number, okay? So if my answer is 6 does not fit into 5, I can't make any groups. Remember, we represent that by putting a 0. So we have a 0 in our quotient, which is okay. 0 times 6 is 0. 5 minus 0 is 5. And again, I'm following the arrows, scooching, and now I have 59. Now 6 goes into 59 using my multiplication facts. I get up all the way up to 9 times 6 is 54. If you ever, for any reason, get higher than a 9, you've made a mistake, because somewhere along the way you either subtracted incorrectly or multiplied incorrectly, but you cannot put 2 digits above any number. So I know I didn't make a mistake because 9 times 6 is 54. 59 minus 54 is 5. Now I'm out of the house. That's my remainder. Remember, I know I didn't make a mistake, and this is how I know. Because I'm going to be smart enough to compare my remainder to my divisor. It has to be less than this. I also know that I didn't make a mistake because the last step in this process, check, and yes, I emphasize it, it's your work. You need to be responsible for it. You check it, okay? Check your work. Now I set all of this up already because you've already learned this. Basically, I am taking my quotient, 1,459, and multiplying it times my divisor. When I do all of that, and I set up my area model, solve, add, I get 8,754. But I started with, now I'm seeing that I must have made a mistake somewhere along the way. Oh, okay, I see my mistake. That should have been a 0. Okay. So we're going to make a correction so that I don't have to do this video over again. And we are going to change this. There we go. Hey, checking my work. Found my mistake, didn't I? Okay, so 8,454 is what this should have been. And I realized that I started with 8,459. So the only thing that I really need you to remember on this is that you had a remainder and you have to add that in. That's an additional step. And once you do that, again, I need to make a little correction here, you will find that you come out with what you started with, 8,459. Those are the simple steps to this, guys. It's a very efficient process, and I do know that in 5th grade, this is the method that you'll be using. So while we certainly learned ladder division or chunking, some people refer to it as, you really eventually want to make sure that you master this, because this is going to help you, and it's a whole lot easier once you understand how to use it. So let me write a couple problems on the board. We're going to do 3,492 divided by 7, and we are going to do 7,381 divided by 6. I have no doubt that you guys will really do well on this, and don't forget, you can watch the video a little bit more, or in your math journal, you'll have this information as well.